They call it the devil's backbone, like they expect you to fight your way across it. The ridge runs pale and bony along Ranch Road 32 between Wimberley and Blanco, cedar and live oak clutching at limestone like green knuckles. I was 26 the first time I drove it alone at night, dead sober and still feeling drunk on moonlight. I'd been helping a friend close down his bar in San Marcos and took the scenic way home because the highway felt too bright and honest. It was early March. A cool north wind pushing dry leaves across the asphalt. My dashboard clock ticked past 1:10 a.m. The sky was clean, stars stitched so tight they made their own haze, and the dark below them so deep my headlights felt like a toy flashlight in a cave. On the shoulder, a little turnout with a handmade cross appeared. White paint, plastic flowers drilled by wind. I pulled in, not because I'm morbid, but because the ridge makes you want to step out and hear how far sound carries. The air smelled like cedar and chalk. Gravel popped under my boots as it cooled. Far off, coyotes tuned up, not the yipping dog pack kind, but the long single note that makes your ribs go hollow. I leaned on the hood and listened to the ridge say nothing for a long time. Then I heard the spurs. It was faint at first, tinny, rhythm sure and unhurried. Jingle. Jingle, jingle. Not the random tinkle of metal in the wind. A pace. A person. The sound came from the caliche cut just beyond the turnout where the old stage road is supposed to have run. My mouth went dry so fast I could hear it. Hello? I called, which was stupid, because the ridge doesn't need your voice. The jingling stopped. The wind picked up and dropped again. Something like leather creaked the way a saddle does when a weight shifts. I told myself someone was out for a midnight ride. Hill country folks are odd enough to do anything. I walked to the edge of the turnout, lighted it with my phone, and saw boot prints in the dust where there should have been only tire tracks. Heel, toe, narrow, the kind you buy for dance floors or funerals. Fresh enough that the edges still held. They went to the road cut and simply didn't come back. The bar side of my brain said pile of rocks, trick of shadow. The other side, the part that remembers being a kid in a dark room, said get in the car. I listened to the kid. I slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors out of habit, and sat still. The interior smelled like dust and cold coffee. Something brushed my back window. Not a hand. The sound was dry, like a twig drawing a line through powder. I eased the shifter into drive, but didn't go. The jingling started again, closer now, and I watched it approach in my side mirror without seeing a body, only the idea of weight moving through brush, cedar branches bending one by one as if a man were pushing them aside without the courtesy of being flesh. I caught a shape in the glass flat-brimmed hat, straight back, a coat that fell the way wool falls. The mirror wouldn't hold him. The outline slid like heat over rock. The spurs chimed once more and stopped right at my door. I held my breath and felt the pressure change in the car, a soft insistence in my ears as though a front had rolled through the cab alone. The door handle twitched once, a courtesy try. Not a rattle. A test. The lock held. The cedar smell sweetened until it was almost rotten, like something green kept too long in a closed room. I put the car in gear, rolled forward slow, and didn't look left out as I straightened back onto 32. The road in my headlights ran clean and empty, but the passenger seat belt ratchet hissed out an inch, clicked, then retracted as if someone heavier than air had shifted their weight beside me. I said, out loud, not tonight, because talking to yourself is better than praying when you don't know who's listening. The belt settled. The air thinned to honest wind. At the next overlook, the white-painted cross appeared again, or another like it. The flowers were new here, tags still tucked in their plastic stems. My phone buzzed with a weather alert, dense fog advisory for dawn. I laughed because laughter is the only way to file certain messages. The ridge fell away behind me, and San Marcos lights made a weak halo ahead. 2 days later, I drove the backbone at noon just to prove I could. Sun burned the cedar smell into something peppery. At the turnout, the boot prints were gone, scuffed, blown, who knows. But along the dirt lip where I'd stood, a line had been drawn, not a tire, not a drag mark. A straight, shallow furrow as if scored by a rowel, heel to toe to heel. Something had paced where I'd paced and matched me step for step. I started bringing a silver coin when I crossed that ridge now. I keep it in my pocket and touch it where the road leans into the sky and the ground below remembers different footsteps. Some nights I hear the jingle folded into the tire hiss and the cedar needles scratching the guardrail. I don't stop at the cross. I don't check the back seat. The backbone is a spine. Spines carry old pain. If you pull over to listen, be ready to be counted. Everyone knows the Marfa lights. Tourists cluster shoulder to shoulder along the state's official viewing area outside town. Phones out, voices a little too loud because the desert hates silence and demands something to push back against it. I'd been through a dozen times and never saw more than ranch trucks and distant border patrol. I didn't care to believe or not. Belief felt like a hobby. One October night, headed from Alpine to Presidio, I stopped anyway. The sky was cloudless. The air had that tiny bite you only get after the first front. It was 12:43 a.m. The viewing platform was empty except for a pair of kids asleep in a pickup with a dog on guard. The dog watched me with the tired suspicion of animals who've learned people don't announce the important things. I leaned on the rail and listened to West Texas be huge. Out there, the Chinati Mountains hunkered like sleeping animals. The desert smelled like dust and iron, the way pennies smell if you warm them. A red hazard light on a far radio tower ticked the miles for me. I might have left after 5 minutes if the dog hadn't made a small, involuntary sound, a whine that rode the wind and landed in my throat. 3 lights flared low over the scrub white at first, then a bruised blue, then red like a breath held too long. They didn't move toward me so much as sharpen, as if the air had decided to focus. I told myself highway reflections, ranchers at TVs, something with a reason. But my body stepped back without asking. The lights arranged themselves. 2 low. 1 high, a scalene triangle a pilot would never draw. They wavered, not side to side, not up and down, wavered inward, flexing like muscles. The dog stood up in the bed with 1 paw on the cab and made a sound that wasn't a bark. The kids slept on. "Okay," I said softly, not sure if I was agreeing or declining. My voice sounded like it had traveled too far to get back to me. A cold brushed my teeth from the inside. That's the only way to say it. The triangle flattened into a line and slid, not across the horizon, but through the space between the platform and the first yucca, as if it remembered a road we didn't. The rails under my palms hummed, not metal hum, not electricity, something like a throat clearing. The lights stopped 50 yards out if the word stopped applies. The red went out. The blue pulsed twice and held. The white narrowed to a point so sharp I wanted to look away. My phone camera made an enthusiastic little chime entirely on its own and open-screen black timer counting. I lowered it. The screen showed something the air did not, 4 lights, not 3, and a smear of pale shapes where the scrub ought to be. I raised my eyes. There were 3 again. The dog backed until it hit taillight and stood there, nails clicking. I thought of every story about lanterns and travelers and lost signals and decided not to signal back. I did not wave. I did not blink my headlights. I did not raise my voice. All I did was pay the kind of attention that makes the world narrow and honest. Lights did something then that bends English. They layered. 1 light slid over another without occluding it. Depth folded. The desert became a piece of paper pinched and creased, and when the crease smoothed, the 3 lights had repositioned themselves 30 yards to the left without traveling the intervening space. My heart tried to climb my ribs. The radio tower blinked like nothing had happened. From far off toward Shafter, a voice came, CB, Spanish, the fast staccato of someone trying to fit meaning through a straw. My phone typed without me, "Stay on the deck." I locked it and slid it into my pocket like it might bite. The top light dimmed until it wasn't light, but the idea of light, a hole cut in dark, then brightened until tears started and pride kept them from falling. "Okay," I said again, and leaned back from the rail until my shoulders touched the sign behind me. The dog lay down and put its nose under its paw like it wanted to hide its scents. Out in the scrub, the triangle unstitched. One light rose while the other two drifted apart. For a ridiculous second, I thought of a hand releasing a coin to drop and another to roll. The coin dropped. The roll continued. The third hung. Then they were gone as if someone lifted a lid. No fade, no recede. The platform wood ticked as it cooled. The radio tower blinked its old rhythm. The dog sighed like a burden had been moved an inch. I stayed another hour because leaving immediately felt like bad manners. The kids never woke. When I finally put the truck in gear, my phone buzzed. The Photos app had made a memory without my consent, a 14-second video of the empty desert, time-stamped 2 minutes before the lights came. The audio was wind and something else whispering like numbers, too fast to be counted, too slow to be noise. I don't go out there with people who want to prove a point anymore. I bring water, and I bring silence, and I keep both. If the lights decide to crease the night, I stand where the state put me and don't claim more ground than that. Some things ask only to be noticed. Some ask not to be named. Saratoga's Bragg Road is a tunnel of oaks and pines, a dirt line laid over an old logging tramway where men once sweated trees into wealth. Folks call it the Ghost Road because a light appears there, so they say bobbing, hunting, sometimes pacing cars. I didn't believe it, and belief matters less than whether the place believes in you. Late July. Heat stuck to the world like syrup. Cicadas sang electric in the canopy. My cousin Elise and I went because boredom is a kind of dare. We cut our headlights, rolled windows down, let the night crawl in. The smell of the thicket is specific water and tannin and green things getting ready to rot. Our tires raised talc-fine dust that floated beside us like companions. "Kill the engine," Elise said. "Let it come to us." We sat in the dark with only the metal ping of a cooling hood. The night chewed. Something heavy moved far back in the trees, then thought better of it. I was beginning to feel dumb when a pale bead winked ahead, small as a lightning bug, too steady to be one. It grew like a pupil opening. My body chose away from it. My head craned toward it. Elise grabbed my wrist, hard. "Don't flash," she said, as if I'd even thought to signal. The bead bobbed left, right, then centered as if it had lined up our hood ornament from memory. It brightened without throwing a beam, lighting nothing, only itself. I could not tell how far it was. 50 yards? 5? It occupied distance in a new way. Headlight reflection, I said to calm a primitive thing in my spine. "Hours are off," she said, and I knew that but wanted to pretend we had some part in making it. The light drifted closer. It didn't climb or descend, simply erased the space between us in a fair, reasonable manner until it hovered at about the height a man's chest might be. Not white, not yellow, more like bone held near a fire. My skin pebbled. Mosquitoes forgot us. There was sound too, a faint iron-on-iron ring, a rhythm with no instrument. Elise whispered, "He's looking," and I knew then which version of the story. She'd been told the decapitated brakeman searching the line. I wanted to laugh that into something we could hold, but my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. The light flared once polite lightning, and in that flash, I saw the road as it had been, rails bright, men hunched, a lamp at the end of a gloved arm. It wasn't a vision so much as a layer. When the flare dimmed, The dirt road returned, but it brought something back with it, the faint smell of kerosene and sweat. "Say we're passing through," Elise whispered. "Say we're not taking. Passing through," I said, feeling ridiculous and relieved to be told what to do. The light receded at once, not away down the road, but to the side, into trees that took it without argument. The night refilled with the regular noises of an ecosystem that had briefly stepped aside to let an old rule walk past. Elise started the car. The engine sounded like a mercy dot. We drove out slow. In the rear view, the light reappeared once, distant this time, low to the ground like someone crouched to look for a dropped tool. It didn't chase. It didn't vanish. It resumed a task we'd interrupted. At the highway, we pulled into a gas station whose fluorescent bulbs made the world look like a diagram of itself. A boy at the register asked if we'd gone down there. We nodded. He said, "You wipe your plates?" We stared. He pointed at the rear bumper. "Dust writes things sometimes." We walked around back. In the talc that coated the plastic were four-finger marks drawn through, slow and exact. Not letter spaces, as if someone four-fingered had measured the width of the place where a name should go. Elise reached to clean it. I caught her wrist and shook my head, not because I knew a rule, only because leaving it felt like finishing a sentence. I drive that way now when I'm headed to Beaumont. I do not seek the light. I do not tell people where it is. If I roll my windows down, I hear the iron rhythm folded into the cicadas, a meter that will outlast both of us. The thicket never stopped logging. It just kept books differently. Some nights the dust on my bumper shows the clean arcs of fingers testing the size of absence. I leave them until rain earns the right to wash them away. Most Texans forget Indianola. The Gulf doesn't. Twice the sea took it 1875 and 1886 storms tearing a bright little port into timbers and memories. What's left sits on Matagorda Bay, a fishing pier, a cemetery with stones that lean like they're listening, oyster shells rattling in broken rings along the shore. I drove there on a blue sky. November afternoon, because some places feel important at angles late, off-season, wrong. The wind was low and smelled of iodine and sunburned rope. Pelicans hung over the flats like ungainly saints. I walked the cemetery a while, reading names that came from other languages and stayed anyway. Near dusk, I took the pier to its end. Water slid under the planks with a particular suck of bay tide. There were 6 other people, 2 men drinking from a shared sack, a father teaching a boy to cast, a woman leaning on the rail who might have been asleep, might have been practicing. The light went thin. A boat droned far out and never seemed to move. The wind shifted and brought a smell. I'd only known once before when a freezer died salt overlaid with sweet rot, as if the Gulf had opened a forgotten drawer. The boy fouled his line and apologized like he'd broken something he loved. The woman at the rail lifted her head and looked toward the barrier island where a finger of mangrove points uselessly at the horizon. The water under the pier changed color. It wasn't sunset doing it. The sky stayed clear. The bay ripened to green-black, the exact shade of an old glass bottle. The planks cooled under my hands as if a cellar had opened. I heard, underneath the water and wind, a wooden knock-knock-knock. Not waves. Not hull. A door. The men with the sack went silent. The father said something simple to the boy about pulling gently. The woman took a half step back from the rail, then forward again, as if remembering a lesson about manners. A light bloomed out where the channel should be lantern yellow, low, too steady for a buoy. Another answered it farther left. Then a third, short-lived, like a cough. I have never been a sailor. I do not know signals, but my chest did. The lights spoke. They asked and were refused. They warned and were ignored. I don't know which way the conversation went, only that it had already happened and was happening again. The knock under the pier became a scrape, wood on wood. A voice rose that could have been wind through reeds, could have been a prayer. The boy said, without turning, "Dad, they're back." And his father said, "Keep your feet still." The woman at the rail leaned farther until I saw her profile in the spare light. Young, hairpinned in a way that would not survive a blow. Her mouth moved. She could have been counting. She could have been naming. The light nearest us hardened until it drew a line on the water, a path that went where no channel is now. The bay itself leaned, then it all unbent. The light went lit off dark. The water went honest again. A gull cried like a hinge. The father exhaled something that wasn't fear, exactly more like respect overdue. The men with the sack began laughing too loud. The woman stepped away and walked down the pier without looking at any of us. As she passed, I smelled lilac impossible there and damp wool. I stayed for a while, because leaving felt like walking out on a conversation where your name had been said. When the moon lifted, pale as a peeled grape, I headed for the cemetery to pay a kind of tax. At the gate, a caretaker's sign hung crooked. "Please secure latch." I secured it and found, on the inside paint, 4 tally marks and a date rubbed near away, 9. The bars were neat. Sailor dash straight out on the drive back to Port Lavaca. My radio crackled, though I was out of stations. A woman's voice, God knows from where, called numbers. 2 fathoms. 1 and shoaling. She never asked for help. She never said who she was. I turned the volume down until the numbers sounded like tide. I don't fish there now. I bring flowers once a year when the wind comes right. I secure the latch. If the bay darkens to bottle glass, I step back and count to whatever number the air asks for, because sometimes that's all the water wanted in the first place, to be counted where it hurt. There are places that pretend to be empty. The old Yorktown Memorial Hospital doesn't bother pretending. Red brick, green tile, crucifixes cracked by heat and time. After it closed in the 80s, it became a thing people dare each other to enter. I told myself I went to photograph the architecture. That was half true. The other half was a headache that had lasted 3 weeks and felt like it had a source I could look at. A caretaker let me in, before dusk, with a shrug that said, "Your choice, not mine." The entry smelled like tempera paint and old bleach. The air tasted like pennies. Down a corridor, sunlight made a perfect square on tile and decided not to move again. My breath fogged once and then didn't, as if I had used up my allotment of clarity. I shot the chapel first pews dusty, altar cloth gray where white used to be. A child's crayon drawing of a hand with too many fingers curled on the floor near a hymnal. In the ICU, I found a single EKG strip pinned to a corkboard with no pushpin, held by memory alone. The line on it was not flat. It made a brief, brave mountain and then an impatient plateau. I took a picture and felt rude. Night came all at once, as it does in buildings that have made darkness part of their staffing. The caretaker had said he'd lock the front at 8. I had his number and a key that looked like a joke. I set my tripod in a hallway outside the old night unit nursery on one side, nurse's station on the other. The walls there were mint, the floor a patchwork of squares that had seen kinds of shoes you only wear when you have a job that times out other people's pain. The sound started small, a wheel misaligned, a cart that wants oil. Squeak, squeak. Pause, squeak. I didn't turn. I watched the doorway where the nursery glass had been removed. In it, absence reflected absence. A draft lifted the hair on my arm in a direction air doesn't move. I said, because I am not original, "Hello?" The cart stopped beside me, which is to say the sound stopped and the floor learned the memory of weight. I smelled baby powder where there could be none, and beneath it something older and iron blood and the metal that remembers blood. A hand touched my sleeve. It was not cold. It was not warm. It was pressure in the shape of fingers reminding me I had sleeves. I kept my eyes forward and said, "I'm passing through." From the nursery came the cleanest sound I have ever heard, a single intake of breath. Not crying, not pain. The first note a person ever makes. It was so pure that I wanted, for a second, to look in and meet it. The part of me that went to church as a kid began to pray automatic and meaningless phrases. The part of me that has waited in 8 chairs for news said no in a voice that didn't need my mouth. The EKG rhythm ticked from somewhere, paper through teeth. A second breath. A third. And then a long adult sigh from the nurse's station, the sound of someone who has charted the same name too many times and is about to do it again. Passing through, I said, because the first rule had worked once in a pine tunnel hundreds of miles. Away and rules like to travel. The pressure on my sleeve lifted. The cart squeak began again, receding toward the elevator that doesn't work. The nursery quieted in a way that wasn't silence, but a door closed on soft hinges. My camera shutter clicked of its own accord and took a picture of a hallway that has been walked until its stones have opinions. I left at 8 on the dot, not because the caretaker's key mattered, but because it felt like shift change. Outside, the live oaks breathed. The caretaker asked if I got what I came for without asking what that was. I said yes, which was true and false. That night, loading files, I found one more image than I'd shot, a frame from the nurse's station. My tripod in the corner, the paperwork holders dark. The analog clock stuck at 2:17. In the lower right, a white patch shaped like a palm hovered over the vinyl, no creases, no lines, only the intention of touch. The metadata time-stamped at 2:17 p.m., which was wrong and meant something. The headache left the next day like someone had opened a window in my skull. I still taste pennies sometimes when I pass a church. If you go to Yorktown, bring nothing you wouldn't hand to a stranger. Wear sleeves. Don't count the breaths for them. Let the people who own that night do their work, and when a hand asks if you are passing through, give the answer that allows both of you to keep moving.